From the WNIN Tri-State Public Media Center in downtown Evansville, I'm David James, and this is 2 Main Street. Okay, let's go back in time. 1967, the Vietnam War is raging. Brave American youth fighting and dying over there while anti-protesters take to the streets back home. A turbulent time for a love story now being shared in a new book. It's a collection of letters from Newburgh to Nam and back. 6 months of correspondence between a high school graduate from southern Indiana, eager to become a nurse, and a U.S. Marine from Pennsylvania in the thick of battle. The letters display a sharp contrast in their daily lives, the Marine dealing with the stress of battle and lost comrades, and the nursing student cramming for tests on physiology and how to perform an enema. Okay. The pen pals go on to become man and wife, and their marriage is 50 years and counting. Later on, we'll meet Nancy Market, who is now Nancy Young, and her husband, Bill Young. Their romance is the subject of the latest book by Scott Salmon, titled Vietnam Love Story, The Love Letters of Bill and Nancy Young, 1967. So, Scott, welcome back to 2 Main Street. When you were last here, we talked about your book, What Are You Going to Write About When I'm Gone? Essays about your mother, who did lose her long and courageous battle against cancer. We're going to talk about Patricia and her legacy later on. So, Scott, let's start with, how did you get involved with telling the love story of Bill and Nancy Young?
Oh, thanks, David. I knew Bill for quite a while. We had the same employer. And one day Bill told me, he was telling me how he had met Nancy. I hadn't met Nancy yet. And I remember it being pretty neat, and Bill was just telling me, and I soaked on it for a few months, and I had a column for the Du Bois County Herald. I needed a Valentine's Day story,
Yeah.
and I remember the Bill story and said, this is pretty cool, but I want to hear the other side of the story. So I talked to Bill and said, hey, can I come over to your house and meet Nancy? I want to hear both sides of this love story, which was the greatest thing I'd ever heard. And so they invited me over. We had steaks, and I interviewed them basically, and so it started from there. Just hearing the story and writing for a column. The amazing thing was, after we were kind of done with the interview, Nancy went upstairs, came back down with these containers of all these. There's this container, and she goes, "You might like this," and it was every letter that she had written and he had written. Somehow, I don't know how they kept all these letters, and here they were, and it was like, it was.
What were they contained in?
Were they in the bags at that time? I can't remember. I keep thinking it was a big plastic container, or they were plastic bags, but
We'll ask Nancy.
Yeah,
later
yeah.
on.
So,
we'll find out.
It was just a dream come true for a writer. It's like, you mean you have all these letters that we're just basically had been talking about, and so that sparked the idea for the book then.
Mm-hmm. Now, these letters from May to October of 1967.
Mm-hmm.
How many letters are we talking about, Scott?
People ask me that. I've never counted, but it's safe to assume of all the letters they written, there were at least there were scores of letters. I don't know how many are in this book, but they continued writing after the Vietnam's saga once Bill was back. But I was really interested in just this time when he was in the jungle and just that period that you mentioned from May to October for the book.
The process of vetting these letters, you had to read them.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have help reading these letters?
I did at one point, but it's, what I needed real help in was trying to read Bill's handwriting. No slam there, Bill. But that was the tough part. But yeah, transcribing them, after we did the story, it went over real well. People loved the story. And then, it's like, well, I've done that, and I really want to at least get these in electronic form for them because the letter's still in pretty good shape, but you know how those things go. So that was the task and the chore. I wasn't really thinking about a book at that time, but it was really, I want to get Nancy's letters. I want to get all of Bill's letters in electronic form for them and their family. And so, yeah, sure. As I'm going, that was 2016. I was still working on around 2017 is when I really got serious about it and had a lot of free time on my hands at that time. But I met my future wife and Bryn, yeah. Yeah, and so a few of our dates were, a lot of our dates were on the weekends. At least she was doing Nancy's letters, and I I bit the bullet and said, I'll do Bill's because these are tough. And he wrote along, and it was very heartfelt. But, Bill wasn't exactly getting to work on a desk either when he's writing these things. So, different places where he's writing them. So we got those, and it was really fun, just like you're sitting across from me now. Bryn was there, and we're just typing away, and then we would pause. Oh, look at this, This is emotional.
Yeah. Well, did reading those love letters affect your relationship with Bryn?
It definitely helped us because it was a good exercise where we're learning about, we're early in the stages.
Sure.
And we're learning this great love stories unfolding between us through their letters. And, I get emotional about this.
I know
for
you
many
do.
reasons.
Mm-hmm. That's all right. That's all right. Well, that's what this book is all about. In fact, the foreword by Jim McGarrah, is that right?
Yeah, Jim.
McGarrah,
Yeah.
he's a Vietnam War veteran,
Yeah.
author and poet, and he writes, these letters are a lesson for those who remain romantics. And in times of trouble, the knowledge you are not alone may save you.
Mm-hmm.
Prophetic words.
Especially from Jim, who, went through rough stuff just like Bill did. And if you read Jim's, foreword or introduction, it's well worth the price of the book there. But just Jim writing, he was amazed of the positive that came from the war.
Sure.
And if you read, in Jim's detailed it before in other stories, he had a rough time. And especially coming back and dealing with it. And he did not have the luxury of a Nancy Market cheering him on while they're, dealing with what they were dealing in the jungle. So his, Jim's introduction gets at that and just credits Bill. Bill got through it because he had something to go back to, and it was just fascinating that Bill and Nancy wrote all these months, never heard each other's voice, only saw some pictures, so the first time they meet in Evansville in October is the first time they've met, and so it was just interesting that they created this relationship just by virtue of letter writing and learning, and they'll tell you more about it, obviously, but they did learn about each other through just this writing process, and which it wasn't texting back then. So what's amazing to me is how these letters got to each other quickly, and I think the military obviously understood the value of letters, so they didn't have to wait too long for a letter, even though it was just handwritten and delivered. It just amazes me that they found Bill wherever he was at.
Sure.
And but it's the just that, they were pouring their hearts out, and especially Bill. What's interesting, Nancy's 18. It's her last summer before college. She wants to be a nurse, and she's going to go to Vincennes to study. And Bill's over in the jungle. He's seeing people get killed. Bill's killing people. This is a job. Mm-hmm. And the difference between where they were at each time. Nancy's talking about this idyllic Newburgh summer in 1967.
Incredible. They really are.
Oh, I know. And so what's the value? Nancy's letters are just amazing because you're learning about this young person who's just graduated from high school and what it was like in 67 and the things you can imagine, the fireworks on 4th of July at the river and just her friends and her family, and learning from an 18-year-old viewpoint what life was like then. Mm-hmm. Yet she still had that, she wanted to support the troops, which a lot of people did back then, and pen paling was a way to do that. Mm-hmm. So the important part about the story is it was just by luck that she was writing to Bill. She didn't know Bill. Bill was from Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. And and it's just watching this love story develop from page one to here they are 50-some years married.
Right. We're talking to Scott Salmon about his latest book, Vietnam War Love Story, The Love Letters of Bill and Nancy Young, 1967. snapshot of what life was like in 1967. And of course, for Bill, Nancy's letters were the kind of the light at the end of the tunnel for him to keep him going. And being a writer yourself, you probably were enthralled by the language that they used.
Yeah.
The power of language in these letters.
Yeah, it's amazing how the letters are written so well.
And they paint pictures too very well.
Yeah, you don't see this in text messages.
No, you don't.
and
No.
emails. It's
And the emotion in these letters too.
Yeah. But the difference in people after they hear about the book, well, I have letters from dad sending to the mom from World War II, and I say, well, yeah, but do you have mom's letters to dad? Do you have?
Sure.
So we got both sides, but what really makes it stand out is they were so well written.
They were.
And you could tell Bill was influenced by his writers that he liked as a kid or he learned in high school. And
Well, they quote poets in the letters too.
yes. Yeah.
And who does that anymore?
No, exactly. And so I think that's the difference. What this stood out, plus what resulted, the difference between these letters and those other letters from other people is they just met through the letters, and they weren't married at the time, and by October they're already you can already hear wedding bells happening. They hadn't even met each other yet.
Well, you mentioned Jim Magara, the gentleman who wrote the foreword, and he also mentioned in that foreword that about life after the war zone.
Yeah.
He says there are 22 veteran suicides every day, and tonight some 67,000 veterans will sleep alone in the streets, and that's very powerful. And I know Bill Young, I'm sure he'll tell us he's one of the lucky guys that he had Nancy in his life, and he had a wonderful experience post Vietnam.
Yeah, and you reference the suicides. The book does reference up front the Veterans Crisis Line. There's a number there, and to get the help and so forth. Because it's a problem now. I mean, it's not just back then. Our military people who are back from the recent wars, and I mean, it's a struggle.
I had some folks on who run the James Bessel Gresham Memorial Home in Garvin Park.
Right.
And that's a place for homeless veterans to get back on their feet. And it's a great project right here in Evansville. Now, I'm curious, were Bill and Nancy Young immediately on board with this project, letting the world know about their romance?
Well, the fact that they were open enough. I mean, the original story, which is my introduction in here, they were open to do that, and you never know where the story's going to go. Once it's published, and the fact that they were open to share those letters. There were a lot of letters, and I was really honored to be allowed to take some home with me because I needed it, because I included some of the letters in that original story.
So you've got the book now, and what's been the reaction from readers?
It's been, so far, I mean, and people who even known Bill and Nancy, and they'll tell you this, finally, they were aware, but they didn't get to see the letters. And I think you'll ask Nancy probably, but a lot of people thought Nancy was crazy. You're falling in love with this guy you don't know over there, and you're getting ready to go to college, and from family and friends to everyone, it's like, are you nuts? And then and I get this from Nancy, and plus some of the comments I've seen, oh, I get it. I'm reading these letters. And so it's an awakening for people who they've known probably most of their lives, who have never been privy to these letters, now getting, I mean, they knew Bill's a great guy now, but how did Nancy fall in love at that time? And they see these letters, and it's like, I think everybody wants to marry Bill now. So watch out, Nancy.
Well, I mean, they both come across as really incredible people in these letters.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I know them now after reading these
that's
letters.
part of it. That's what people say too, and there is that, the bad stuff that Bill went through, and the violence, the stuff that's running through his mind, and then the more happy. I mean, there's so much emotion through these letters, and I don't think you could have made it up. I think the value of that was it was hard to believe, but it's true.
Yeah. Tell us about the cover of the book here. Let's.
Hey. Yeah. Well, I knew I had to get Nancy on the front in her bathing suit. That's one of the first pictures that Bill saw of Nancy, I believe, and you can see why he just fell in love with her. And I finally just realized there's a dog in the picture. Wow.
Now, is she in the snow here?
Yeah, she's in the snow.
In her bathing
I
suit.
believe her mom took pictures for that. So she's in her bathing suit in the snow. Very fun, 18-year-old girl, and having that was her life. And then the next picture is Bill and one of his buddies. I believe that's Angel. In their military guard out in Vietnam, and the contrast was what I was hoping. And Delaney designed this, but what it was like for Nancy, that carefreeness, and there's serious stuff here in this other picture. So I'm hoping that the cover itself, it's pretty bare of a cover, but I think those two pictures speak a lot.
And then we have the back cover.
There's their wedding photo, big. So the result, Bill gets back, and within a couple of years they're married, and that's them newlyweds, and they're the final picture in the book is of them fairly recent of what they look like now, and they have some family since then, and it's a great. I bill it as it's the greatest love story never told until now. And there's the Bill and Nancy now. So
And we're going to meet them in just a moment.
Yeah, and they are just so dynamite. I've become such good friends with them, even without this book. And they're great people.
Well, Scott, we're going to put you in timeout for a little bit, and we're going to bring the Bill and Nancy Young in here. We're going to talk about, their personal reactions to all this.
It's their story.
Bill's description of the incessant rain in Vietnam and the dangers he faced every day on a fire base. Also, Nancy's prowess at skinning a squirrel. That's also mentioned in the letters. And life after those letters written back in 1967. A marriage, 53 years and counting. It's an incredible love story. Scott, we're going to talk to you in a minute. Thanks a lot. This is 2 Main Street. I'm David James. My guests are Nancy and Bill Young. Their love letters are featured in a new book by Scott Salmon, A Vietnam Love Story, from Newburgh to Nam. Now, in the foreword, Jim McGarrah says, read these letters and become a better human being for doing it. So how does that make you feel, Nancy Young?
Overwhelmed.
Sure.
Overwhelmed. I wasn't thinking of that when I was writing the letters.
Sure.
If it can be something helpful for people, it makes me happy. We shared a lot of ourselves. I mean, it was real, that's for sure. I loved how you brought up skinning the squirrel with Scott. My uncle taught me how to do that.
How do you skin a squirrel? I'm curious.
Well,
not that I want to do it right now, but there may be an occasion someday.
I don't think I want to go into that, David.
Okay. All right. What was the purpose of? Were you going to eat the squirrel? Is that?
My uncle had hunted, and
Okay.
he lived in rural Illinois. He was one of my heroes that I loved, and he said, "Come out here. I'm going to teach you how to skin a squirrel." Like, why would I ever need to learn that? But yeah, so he showed me how to do it, and I helped him with it. And Bill was impressed that this girl learned how to skin a squirrel.
Well, how old were you when you learned this?
I was probably 17 and a half, 18.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, did you always want to be a nurse?
Always.
Okay.
Always. From 4th grade on, that's what I wanted to do.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So, Bill, what's your reaction to this gentleman saying reading this book will make you a better person?
I think I'm still absorbing it. I had not read these letters till just a few weeks ago when we got our copy of the book.
Really?
So, and all those, I can't explain why I hadn't. So when I read them, I sat down one evening, read it all the way through, and it was pretty much a roller coaster in a lot of ways because I wasn't sure what I had written and how I had written it.
Sure.
And so when I read what Jim said, I thought, well, I guess I better read this to revisit this whole journey. So
Sure.
That's what we did. And so I don't forget it. One of the reasons that, Scott had mentioned they were in a little lunch box or lunch bags, all for our older daughter, Katie,
Our middle
daughter.
child. Yes.
had years before, all those letters had been for decades in a green laundry bag, just all together. So Katie had taken upon herself to get them all organized. So by the time we shared this with Scott, they at least said we're somewhat organized. Mm-hmm. But I guess I've just been totally amazed, even as we sit here and talk about it, that it's people are interested in such a thing.
So Nancy, you saved all these letters.
I saved all my letters. Yes.
Okay.
I was up at Vincennes at the time, in first year of nursing. Mm-hmm. And yes, every time I got a letter, I put it in a shoebox that I had under my bed and kept them all these years. Unlike Bill, I would get his letters out and read them occasionally. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't quite as much of a surprise for me as it was for him. And I might be speaking out of place here, but I think he was a little afraid to read them because of bringing back so much of the war for him. Sure. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was very much the case.
Well, yeah, every letter, I mean, I'm sure reliving that moment in your life, the good and the bad and the frightening, I guess. That would be my take on that.
I just find it interesting. I was afraid maybe, when you're young and you're gung-ho, because when I was there was no draft, and it was still kind of John Wayne and apple pie. And I was afraid that maybe being a gung-ho young kid at the time, I would have thought I needed to impress her somehow by talking more about this. So I was relieved to see that, as a rule, there are references to things, but I think I was scared that maybe it would just take me to a place I didn't want to go.
Yeah. Let's learn more about Nancy and Bill. Now, Nancy, you grew up in Evansville?
In Evansville. I was born and raised in Evansville and went to Memorial High School, graduated in 1967. Always wanted to be a nurse. We lived in...
Any more medical people in your family?
Actually, no.
Really?
No.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't have that many choices at that time either, David. Mm-hmm. You could be a teacher, a secretary, a nurse.
Well, that's true.
That was about it.
That was the
but I always
trio
wanted to
there.
Yeah, I always wanted to be a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
My mom and dad lived in Evansville for a long time, over on Florida Street, East Side, and then we moved to Newburgh. I went 1 year to Rex Monday when I was a freshman, and then when we moved to Newburgh, we were in Memorial District. So then I started going to Memorial High School and did my last 3 years there. Mm-hmm. So when I was a senior, I was working at St. Mary's. It was St. Mary's at the time. I was a candy striper there, and met a guy, Don, was a friend, and he said, I'm going to join the Marine Corps, and I'm going to go to Vietnam. Will you write to me? And I said, sure. Yeah, I thought it was a patriotic thing to do.
Sure.
So that's how it started. I wanted to raise his morale a little bit, so I said, Mom, let's go out and take these pictures in the snow in my bathing suit. And she goes, what? I said, yeah, great. I said, bring the dog. Let's do the dog thing. And I got to have a beach ball. And she goes, you're kind of crazy. And I said, yes, I know. So she took the pictures.
Okay.
And I had sent a couple to Don. Mm-hmm. Then Bill can tell you the rest, I guess, how he saw the picture.
So you were kind of like a USO, I guess, in a way.
I guess.
Help the troops
Yes,
morale.
help the troops
Definitely.
morale. Yeah.
Definitely. Now, Bill, where'd you grow up?
I came from a little place in the middle of Pennsylvania called Lock Haven. And actually, it was the home of Piper Aircraft.
Okay.
And some of the grandsons were both in my graduating class, but graduated in June '65. And then I went down to Johnstown, Pennsylvania on a manager training program for Woolworths. They had just built this upscale version of their Woolworths store and something called a shopping mall, which was still a big thing. Yeah, it was a big thing in those days. So I went down there to go in that program. And I'm not sure what it was that caught my eye, but somewhere around January of '66, I took the train. I decided, well, I'm going to go enlist. Again, it was still John Wayne and apple pie in those days. So I took the train over to Johnstown, Pennsylvania, signed up with the Corps, and then I went to boot camp. And,
Where'd you go to boot camp?
Down Paris Island.
Oh, boy.
Wonderful,
Yes.
Yeah, it looks. We went back not too many years later to see his son-in-law graduate, and it was so much smaller than I remember it being.
And they picked the most miserable place.
Oh
for
yeah,
boot camp.
yeah. It had a lot of scenery to it. But anyways, graduated in April of '66, and was at Camp Lejeune for just a couple months, and then volunteered to go to Nam. So got in Nam in September of '66.
What was it like when you got off the plane there in Nam?
One of the first things I think people would tell you is the smell. There's we landed in Da Nang, and there's a hot, humid, stagnant smell. And this was in Da Nang. Of course, that was a big military base, so there's a lot of aircraft, so you had fuel or all that stuff. And we got in late in the afternoon, if I remember, and they put us in these Quonset huts. And then next morning they got us up about 5 and put us in trucks, and they took us to our units. I just remember it being a 4 or 5 hour drive or whatever it was. And I joined my unit, and it was the 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines Golf Company.
What'd you see on the drive?
A lot of water buffalo.
Really?
Yeah. A lot of, you'd be going in areas where there's a lot of jungle on each side, then you might break out into rice paddies. And it was really hot. It would make nights like we've had the last couple of nights with our humidity look like it was an air conditioning. It was just terrible weather. And we got into the camp, and it started to rain. And we found out that they had just lost quite a few guys a week before. So part of it, because there was like 8 or 9 of us that were being taken out that night. So we were part of a replacement effort, replacing troops. And so we got there, and the first night it was pouring rain, and I was a machine gunner, and the picture on the book is my best friend Angel Cacheris. We went there together, and we had to go out on patrol that night. And so the very first night there, we're out in the monsoons.
Threw you right into it.
Threw right into it, and of course we, as it happened, we were on an ambush that night, and there were some Viet Cong that walked into the ambush. They were basically carrying grain and things like that, and one of them was a payroll master. So they walked into the ambush. So that first night was kind of a baptism by fire.
Oh, sure. Didn't
So
have time to really think about it. You were just right in it.
Yeah, it was the first night. So it was. Well, here we are. So then, by the time, months passed, we had a lot of, different incidents going on. I do remember being on an ambush with some Vietnamese Marines on Christmas Eve, and it was a clear night, and the moon was bright. And off in the distance, I'm hearing, they were supposed to be a truce, but that was on paper. And I remember hearing what I thought, sounds like Silent Night. And as I'm listening, because that was I realized that I'm hearing Silent Night. And then I hear the little sound of a drone type of engine, and it turned out to be a Piper Cub that was going over the rice paddies playing Christmas music for the troops, and I thought, here I am, and I'm thinking, I know where that plane was built.
Really. Yeah. Irony there.
So there's so coming up to more where what we're just talking about is in March of '67 we had the picture that's on the book is a picture that was taken about 2 days before we knew we were going to be taken to this area down towards below Chulai, and it was an area where there'd been a lot of activities. And so when we got down there, we were down there for a week or so, and then we did walk into an ambush and took quite a few casualties, and actually retreated back or moved back into an area where some Army troops were. And we camped with them for a while we got some basic resupplies. But about a week later, we walked into another incident, and that's when they pulled us out and took us back up to Da Nang to get replacements.
We're talking to Bill and Nancy Young. They're the subject of this book, Vietnam Love Story, the love letters that they wrote back and forth in 1967. Of course, here's Bill in the thick of it in Vietnam, and he finally gets these letters from a girl, recent high school graduate in Evansville, Indiana, who wants to be a nurse. And I think you were expecting a letter from Debbie, but you got a letter from Nancy. How did that happen, Nancy?
Okay. Like I said, I was writing to Don, this friend, and he said, my corporal would like to have somebody to write to. And I said, okay, well, I'll see if one of the girls in class would like to write to someone. So Debbie said she would, this girl that was in my homeroom class at Memorial. And I guess maybe 3 days later, she said, oh, I changed my mind because I'm going steady with this guy now, and I don't want to write to anybody else.
Sure.
And so I thought, well, okay, well, I'll just write to both of them. And so that's what I did. I wrote to both of them. But first, Bill, tell David about what happened in the foxhole there.
Well, the backstory was when they took us back up at Da Nang, they put us in this old French fort on a big hill outside of Da Nang. And at that time, the VC were shooting a lot of rockets over this mountain range into Da Nang. And so we were regrouping, and so we had all these new guys coming in. So about the only thing you could do was to try to help them. And they knew that the history of what had been going on with our unit. And so when you're out on this hilltop, I had what they used to call listening posts, where you'd have 4 guys maybe 50 yards out from your perimeter. But also there was a lot of wild pigs in that area. So what we were having trouble with is guys opening up on any kind of a sound they heard,
Sure.
because the new guys were scared. So what I would do is, I was the platoon leader for the weapons platoon, so I would go around and try to talk to these guys. So, but the only thing you really talk about maybe was women. So I think Dan was trying to, connect with one of the few veterans. There's only about 22 or 23 of us that were still the veterans. So he wanted to impress me by, I'm writing this girl, would you like to write this girl? Well, when you look at this picture, it'd be pretty hard to say, well, I think it might have took me 2 or 3 seconds to say, yeah, I could handle writing it.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, we're on board here. So when I actually saw the record, the picture, and then that was how it kind of started, by just trying to work with new guys, not to get through nights when they were scared.
The letters are really neat because they contrast your really almost idyllic life here in Evansville and in Vincennes. Here you are, a young lady, you're going to school, your whole life ahead of you, your future, and you're excited about school and this new career. And here's poor Bill over there. I mean, it's raining, it's miserable. He's wondering about what's going to happen next. He's losing buddies. It's a contrast in life 10,000 miles apart. It's really an incredible read on that.
And I always wanted to raise his spirits. So I would talk about the silly things that we did,
You go down the river, you say.
Yes. We spent a lot of time at the river. Yes. In Newburgh and in Vincennes. It was just a calm place to go. And there were times I wrote letters from sitting there at the river. Yeah. And I don't know, he seemed to enjoy them. So the more I could write, the better I thought I could make him feel.
And you guys had this correspondence. You would Mahana and Ricky Tick. What's that all about? Mahana, Bill or Nancy, you want to tackle that one, or can we talk about that?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
yes, yeah.
All right, I didn't know. There was
What he explained to me, and he had forgotten, I think, because he hadn't read the letters for 54 years. Mahana was something that was so good it was indescribable.
Okay.
That's the word. And I don't know if it was an Asian word, or someone told me that it was Hawaiian, which is possible. And Ricky Tick, I think, just meant pretty quick.
Yeah. One of the guys in our unit was from Hawaii.
Okay.
And I think that's where the Mahana came from.
Okay, so that was your goal, to be in Mahana.
Yeah.
And she was your Mahana.
She was that
Definitely.
Mahana.
So obviously you're looking forward to these letters from Nancy. Yeah. Definitely. How did the mail get to you? Was it pretty quick, or?
Well, it would usually come in batches, because at that time the rule was you didn't ever want to keep more than a third of your force in your camp, and all we really had was tents that were left over from the North Korean War, or
gosh.
I'm sorry, the Korean War.
Oh, boy.
So the tents were just tents. I mean, a lot of the sea rations we had were still left over from Korea, and some of the
Boy.
even some of the grenades that we had and that changed as we were there longer. But so you always kept 2/3 of your force out of the camp, and that was usually in what they called search and destroys, or they could be long-range patrols where you might be going 3 or 4 days. So when you were out on the search and destroys, it would be pretty rare that you didn't get mail every day.
Sure.
You got ammo and you got food. But so occasionally, if you were out on a 30-day search and destroy, you might get mail twice. If you were in camp but always out on patrols, you might get it every 2 or 3 days. So it was
So
kind
you
of in
might
batches.
get a batch of letters.
They would be a batch. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and they always knew what letters I had because you can still smell the perfume on those letters to this day. Yeah. Yeah.
So I saw one of the letters, September 24th, 1967. Seems like a proposal of sorts in that letter, Nancy. Is that how you read that?
That's exactly how I read it. That's exactly how I read it. And when I brought that up to him, I've brought that up to him through the years several times.
She mentioned it.
Yes, mentioned
small
it.
conversation.
And
He didn't say, "Will you marry me?"
Yes.
But there was the hint there.
Yes, I thought so
The
too,
suggestion.
David. Yes, I thought so too. So I got that letter out and tried to show it to him a couple times. Do you remember this? Or because his handwriting really was bad, I said maybe I just misread it, but I don't think so.
So you had to look over that several
Yes.
times.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you show it to your mom?
I don't think so.
Oh.
I don't think I did.
Well, how did she react? How did your family react to this?
Well,
this budding romance.
They didn't really know.
Oh.
They didn't really know because I was up at school. See,
Okay.
I was at Vincennes. I wasn't at home.
Okay.
And
So the letters were coming to VU.
yes, letters were coming to VU
Okay.
to me. My roommate Mimi, she knew.
Okay.
We had gone to high school together at Memorial and to nursing together at Vincennes. So she was aware. But my parents, I didn't really say too much about it. I mean, they knew I was writing to someone, but they didn't know that it had gotten very serious very quickly.
Sure.
Yes.
So then, these gets more serious. The letters get more serious. You agree to meet when Bill gets some leave, and then the waiting game begins, Bill, for you to get out of Nam.
Yeah.
And that had to be kind of frustrating.
It was.
When's this going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, supposedly, you were going to get out on the 13 months later to the date, but it's so much dependent on how the strength of your units and whether or not they could really let everybody go at one time. So you had this date that you thought you should get your orders, but you never knew for sure. And I'm sure if you've talked to any prior vets, they probably had what we called a short timers calendar, which sometimes could be very creative. And what you would do is you'd color in a little date each day till you got down to 52 days, and other guys used cards, but I had a short timers calendar, so I kept it faithfully, but you never really knew how it was going to be. And I did have one break in there between where
You went to Okinawa, right?
yeah, they sent me to a Vietnamese language school. And I don't know how that happened. I just came in from a patrol one day, and they said, you're going to go learn Vietnamese. And that was the first class they'd had in Okinawa, and it was with we had 13 Green Berets, and I was the only Marine, so we had a lot of inter-service
Sure.
fun between ourselves, and we learned enough to be functional. Although I can tell you stories about how it wasn't too functional when I got back and I had to do some of my first interpretations, but the way we came in from a bad situation. A recon patrol had been ambushed, and they were using them as bait. And so when we went out to try to get them back, we walked into a situation, and air power came in, and we were able to get out of that situation. We came back into camp, and as I was coming back into camp, Angel, who's my great friend, I could see him coming in from a patrol that he had been on. But I got off, they brought us back in trucks. And as soon as I got off the trucks, I had this guy come up and said, you got 20 minutes to get your bag back, your orders are in. So I had just enough time to get some stuff in my sea bag and get on a truck. And about the time Angel was coming inside the fence, a barbed wire fence, I was leaving on the truck. So all I had a chance to do was just kind of wave to Angel, saying, well, hope to see you again. And then we flew into San Francisco, if I remember correctly, and I called you
You
to
did.
say, okay, I'd like to come meet you.
Mm-hmm.
And
So you set up a meeting.
That was on
Yes.
Friday night.
Yeah, it was on
Called
Friday
night. And he was coming in Saturday morning into Evansville.
Mhm.
And my dad said, "You're not going to go by yourself. You know, you've never met this man before."
Sure.
And of course, my dad had been in the Second World War. So he kind of knew what soldiers were like,
Yeah.
I think.
yeah,
And he's finally getting home. And
Yes. So I said, "No, I'm going by myself." And I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still kind of amazed that he let me, but I did.
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, how will I know you?" And he goes, "I'll be the guy in the Marine Corps uniform with a Playboy under his arm."
Playboy magazine. Yeah.
Magazine.
Yeah.
Playboy
Yeah.
magazine. Exactly.
Well, that was rather bold.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course,
So-
that could have been a lot of soldiers.
That
Yeah.
could have been a lot of soldiers. Yes.
But I was the only military guy on the plane that
Okay.
day.
All right.
That made it easy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, we flew in there, and
So that first meeting, did you guys kiss?
You
No?
betcha.
Okay.
And I think I initiated that.
Okay.
He was kind of dumbfounded, I
Well,
think.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
I remember putting my arms around him and being up on tiptoes and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So then, I know you took him to your campus to show him around where you were
Mm-hmm.
a nursing student.
well, at first we went back to Newburgh
Mm-hmm.
to my mom and dad's, and
Yeah.
he spent the night there. That was Saturday night.
Yeah,
I took him
got
around
to-
Newburgh.
Got to meet
Okay, there you go.
Got to go see the river.
Beautiful
Got to go
Newburgh.
see the river.
Historic Newburgh.
Yes,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And then he rode the bus back to school with me on Sunday because I had to be back up at school Sunday night by 10:30. We had curfew. The girls had curfew at that time.
Wow.
I know. And the boys didn't.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. So he rode up on the bus with me.
Mm-hmm.
And you had referred to this a little bit earlier, but yes, I started dating this guy up at school just for something to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it wasn't ever serious on my end at all. But I did tell Bill about it. I think I told you when we were going around Newburgh that afternoon.
I think so.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was aware. So we get up to Vincennes to the bus station, and there he is sitting there waiting for me at the bus station.
Classic.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
and I didn't know.
Awkward.
It was very awkward. It was
yeah.
very awkward. And Bill said to me, "I'm not going to get off the bus. I don't want to cause you to be upset or anything.
What
or
a
cause
gentleman.
Yes, exactly.
Well, that says a lot about Bill right
Yes,
there.
absolutely. That made, I was in love with him already, but it made even a further
Okay.
impression at that
This
point.
guy's for real.
This guy's for real. And what he said was, "If you want me to come back, I will." But he was going to New York to visit his sister
Mm-hmm.
because he came straight from Nam to
Sure.
Evansville,
Yeah.
you know.
He wanted to see his family.
Yes. So he said, "If you want me to come back, you call me." And that was a Sunday. Monday afternoon, I called him. And I said, "I want you to come back."
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you get out of the Marine Corps. When did you get out of the Marine Corps?
I got out on December 23rd of '68.
Okay.
When I came back in October, I was in Lejeune maybe 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then the battalion I was part of, the Marines guard the base at Guantanamo. And they used to just send down individual replacements. So they made the decision they were going to send down a full unit and make that their duty station. So as luck would have it, I was assigned to the 8th Marines, and the 8th Marines were the ones that they decided they're going to move the whole battalion down to
Cuba.
Cuba. So in January, I'm on a boat for 3 days, and they're going down, seasick, I might add, going down to Cuba. And so I was in Cuba. And there's a leeward side and a wayward side, and on the one side is where the bunkers is. And so you sit on one side in bunkers, and then about 400 yards away is all the Cubans, the Cuban soldiers, and they're sitting in bunkers. And you just watch each other with telescopes.
Oh my
And
God.
there's a minefield in between. But anyways, I was there from January till late May, I think it was.
Mhm.
My very, very best friend growing up, and kind of a foster brother, had joined the
101st.
101st, and he was killed in Vietnam in March. So the Red Cross, but they were having struggles with getting his remains back, and so in March, Bobby was killed, and but the Red Cross got a hold of me and down in Cuba, and they arranged for me to come home to be for his funeral when we finally got his remains home.
Mm-hmm.
And so since at that time I was a short timer, I was due to get out in February of '69. But I actually got an early release of 20 days to go out and go to be a policeman in Baltimore, because the police forces were all looking for
Sure.
veterans.
Yeah.
So we got married on the 21st of December, and we drove immediately down
1969. Eight.
to
Okay.
immediately drove down to
Mhm.
Fort Camp Lejeune
Mhm.
and got out of the Corps. And
That was our honeymoon.
that was our honeymoon on
So where did you
23rd.
get married? What?
We got married in Newburgh.
In Newburgh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your honeymoon is at Camp.
Camp Lejeune.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but we're getting out of the Corps.
With his first sergeant, I might add.
Yeah.
We stayed at their house.
Yeah, we did.
Scenic,
We did.
okay.
Yes, it was very
See,
romantic.
and the plan then was I had 30 days to report to Baltimore, so we're back in
Vincennes.
we're back in Vincennes in January of '69, and then
Mhm.
that didn't happen.
Okay. All right. So you guys are married.
Yeah.
Then you have a family. Tell us about your family.
Do. We have 3 children. Christy is the oldest, and then Kate's, as she calls herself, the middle child. and Eric is our baby, and our baby is going to be 42, I think, this month. We have 3 grandchildren. Natalie is 20 years old and is pre-med at Purdue. And then Will lives with his daddy in Versailles, Kentucky, and he will be going into the 7th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And Axel is going into the 3rd grade, and he lives in Richland. So they don't live very far
That's
from us
good.
at all.
That's good.
Yeah,
Because you guys live in Spencer County.
we do.
Okay.
We live
Out
in
in
between
the-
Hatfield and Rockport, out in the sticks.
Definitely. That is
David.
definitely in the
Yes,
sticks.
yes.
So did you become a nurse?
Oh, I most certainly did.
Okay. Tell me
Yes.
about your nursing career.
Oh, my. How long do you have, David?
Oh, I got about 2 minutes here.
Oh, let's see. Well, I've probably been a nurse now for about 54, 55 years, I guess you could
Are
say.
you still?
I still take care of a young man a couple times a month. He's quadriplegic, wonderful young man that is always up and is an inspiration to me.
Sure.
So I'm doing that. The last thing I did, I've done a whole lot of different things, but the last thing I did, and the thing I'm most proud of, is my 12 years with hospice. So I did hospice in Spencer County. Very small hospice. There were just 3 nurses, and one of the girls, my boss, was the administrator. And so there were the 2 of us that did patient care. And that was it. I mean, it was just us 2. And we did all the care for our patients.
Well, that's a very compassionate. You have to be very compassionate
Yes.
to do that. Deal with the family
It was a privilege. It was
Yeah,
a
it
privilege to be with these people.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I had some a memory care expert on my show one time, and my mother, she suffered from dementia and Alzheimer's, and I said suffer, but she said no, they really don't suffer.
They don't.
They don't. They're in their own little world and
They
everything.
are.
It's the family that suffers, really.
That's exactly right.
Because you're so helpless.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
We had one lady in particular that I will never forget. And my friend and I would take turns going to take care of her. And on Fridays, we called it Spa Day because we washed and rolled her hair and styled it for her and painted her nails and put lipstick on and perfume. And she had dementia also. And we had to walk in back of her, as I remember, to get her to the living room. And so there was a full-length mirror there. She was so cute. And she looked in the mirror and she goes, "Who is that woman?"
All right.
But I mean, she was a very happy person.
Sure. Yeah.
And so you're right. It's not the patient that suffers with dementia. It's at least not in the advanced
Sure.
stages.
Yeah.
It's the
Bill,
family.
so, Bill, what career did you get into eventually?
Well,
You weren't a cop in Baltimore.
nope, it wasn't. I ended up actually working with Pinkertons for a short while I was going to college. One day I'm in the office, and I look out and I see this business college across the street, and decided, well, I'll go check it out. And I went over there. I was just going to take a night class, and all of a sudden I was enrolled. I was in a finance class, so I graduated with an associate degree from there, and then I went on to Brescia and got my finance degree. And I was privileged to serve with a company that Scott and I both worked with, Kimball International, for just a little bit short of 40 years. So that journey was absolutely marvelous. Got to work in 4 different countries. Got to work with numerous different units in Kimball, usually in the finance or HR. In fact, probably the last 8-10 years was mostly working with back in China, and then at the end, actually working with some of our business offices in Vietnam, which was a strange travel. But I was so blessed. 'Cause
What
I
a
got
circle.
and then, I was able to, up in the county, it's just been a marvel. Moving into Spencer County in a small rural environment was a perfect thing for us. And our property is up in an area that even reminds me of where it was where I came from back home, up in a ridge with woods. And I had a chance to get involved with a lot of nonprofits. I was honored to help work with a nonprofit to help bring doctors into the county and food banks and things like that. So through the years, and that's how I think I got closer with Scott because of his efforts with, We'll Read for Food. And so just blessed in so many ways, I can't even count them.
Well, you guys are a wonderful couple. It's been a privilege for me to meet you and learn about your story. Reading those love letters is a great experience, and sharing them with the world. And we need that right now. Everybody needs to read something like this. So thanks a lot for being my guest. I appreciate it.
Thank you so
David.
kindly. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Welcome back to 2 Main Street. I'm David James. We've been talking to Bill and Nancy Young, married 50 years plus, about their love letters from 1967, a Vietnam love story. Scott Salmon, he edited the book along with his daughter Delaney. And so your last appearance here, we talked about your mom, and she was struggling with cancer then, and you wrote this collection of essays, What Are You Going to Write About When I'm Gone? And so now she's gone, and you're still writing.
Still writing about her a lot.
Yeah, really. I mean, she's left quite a legacy. And when did she pass?
It was last fall. It was almost, she was given 5 years, and it was almost exactly 5 years. In between that time, she had been given some other death sentences, and it was a war, and she kept winning the battles. But she knew, time the 5 years got here, we knew it was all she wrote. But she was a fighter.
Oh, definitely. So was there a celebration of her life?
Well, the funeral was rough. I wrote quite a few stories after that, a bad thing that happened to me at the funeral home. I introduced my wife to the funeral home director, and unfortunately I called her my ex-wife's name, and my wife's just like, your mom just did that on purpose, So it was I got some mileage out of that, but I think that was Mom's last laugh. But we just recently, the Will Read and Sing for Food show that was defunct since 2018, our last show, we did do another show 2 or 3 weeks ago, and that was in honor of Mom. And it raised money for the Anderson Woods Summer Camp in Perry County, as well as the next Astra Theater. So it was a kind of a split, charity thing there. But it was in memory of Mom, and it's still raw. And even, we wanted to have a picture of Mom all the time, and not just me. It was like, we can't do this. So we,
Well, you're getting your nickname Puddles here.
Yeah, I was going to apologize to that. My wife will start calling me Puddles because I'm a concert crier now. If I go see a concert and there's a song, I'm crying, and Mom.
Cry at movies?
Oh my God! And just I go look at Nancy through the glass there, and because Nancy had a pretty pivotal role, and just hospice related to a degree with Mom at the last night.
Oh, I know That's quite a journey. Going through that, definitely. 1967. How old were you in 1967, Scott Salmon?
At that time, I was 3 years old.
Well, okay, so you didn't quite understand what was going on in 1967.
I don't know if I'm imagining it, but I do remember the TV, like later in the 67, 68, when you were seeing. I do remember it, unless I'm just. So media's shaped me, but I swear as a kid you would see this on the news.
Okay.
And I really didn't know what to make of it, but it just seemed horrible.
Well, the first Super Bowl was in 1967.
Was it really?
Yeah, Green Bay.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Defeated Kansas City. Got some other things from 1967. Some of the songs. All You Need Is Love. I'm a Believer by the Monkees. Boy, let's see what else we got here. And it was the St. Louis Cardinals won the World Series.
Wow,
that year,
that was good.
beating Boston.
But
so.
it's interesting, David, because the letters of Bill and Nancy are referencing these songs and these movies, and
I know it.
so it's capturing that '67.
It is.
Too.
And you said it might be a good screenplay.
Yeah, there's somebody that showed an interest right when we released the book in May. A guy just, he was tied with he was in the business and he was moved. If I remember correctly, we've talked a bit, but the 9/11, all of a sudden he was ready to, at a later age, he ended up going to Afghanistan.
Sure.
And he remembers the letters between him and whether it was his girlfriend but he, thanks to Google search, I mean, he just all of a sudden heard about this book and he just saw what was on Amazon on just a few of the early pages, and he goes, immediately was like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to write. So we're talking about it. Writing a screenplay is not the same as getting it made, but I mean, he's got the connections and
But you can see this visually, and also with the music behind it too, of that era and the way people dress, what was going on. It was a turbulent time in our country's history. You had racial problems, and of course the people were protesting. Then they had the wave of patriotism. There was a lot going on in the late 60s.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, it's a time capsule. The letters are. So
Definitely.
And Vietnam War love story, and you get on Amazon, that's where it's done. Yeah.
Well, Scott Salmon, what's next for you now?
Well, I'm probably doing a follow-up to Mom's book, because when What Are You Going to Write About When I'm Gone ended, Mom was still alive, and I think it was a year or so before. And so, it ends, Mom's still alive, all these stories. But after she died, and she keeps just reappearing. And so there are a lot more. I'm either going to add an expanded edition and just make it a full-length thing. But I'm due for, and with Mom's story, they call me Puddles, and I get all teary-eyed, but a lot of funny stuff in Mom's stories, as you know. Yeah. So there's that. But I do know I need to also, get back to a totally funny collection. So I got another essay collection I'm working on this year and it's all newspaper columns. So it's not like I'm sitting here writing a book. I've got tons of stories to compile and put together. So I'm fortunate that way.
And you live in Fishers now.
I moved to Fishers last September. My wife was living there. We were married in 2019, but she was from that area, and so I would work down here with Kimball Electronics. I was a remote husband for a year or so, and COVID made things weird too, after I was married in 2019, but we were away for about 6 months from each other. But I found out it's better to be a remote employee, thank you, Kimball Electronics, versus a remote husband. And I like the move, but we're still, like I said, we're reading Scene for Food show again. I'm hoping to even do some stuff up at Fishers with that, start small and build up. So I got some things in the works, but we still like to get down here to either the Lincoln Amp or Astor Theater to maybe do some more shows, because it's helping others. So, and it gets me a chance to see all my friends again, and it's. Yeah.
Well, keep writing, Scott. We really appreciate you being here and bringing us the story of Bill and Nancy Young, their Vietnam love story, their love letters. In 1967, it really is a snapshot in time. A wonderful couple, and reading these letters gives you hope for this world,
We need it right now.
We certainly do. Thanks a lot, Scott Salmon.
Thank you, David.
I'm David James, and this is 2 Main Street, presented by Jeffrey Berger Kimmerin and the Berger Wealth Services team at Bayard Private Wealth Management.